This week, we're going to talk about not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 documentaries. I went to a toy show in New Jersey and 3 rad things. And now your host, Mike Indeglio.
What is up, team? How's it going? This is K&M Geekly, just a sneak peek at 2 geeks talking about some of the things, getting them through their week. We welcome you to the last vestige of winter here in the Northeast, as I guess it's nationwide, right? We're heading straight into spring this week.
It does, yeah. Spring looks different in different parts of the country, but we're definitely doing it.
That's true. So Keith and I are going to hopefully spring back from our seasonal affect disorder. At least that's what I'm fighting this week pretty hard.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some things. So we've been watching documentaries. I was excited to. I started a 4th. I wanted to go for the quad doc, but I didn't quite finish it. So I only have 3 to talk about. But luckily, my co-host here, Keith Varney, unbeknownst to me, watched 2. So that brings us up to I don't know own it.
Quintuple.
I was just thinking of the Spanish word. I'm gonna abort.
Cinco.
No,
Cinco.
That's 5. Well, yes, you're right.
That's 5. That's how many we have.
I studied Spanish for like 8 years.
I took Spanish 5. I took Spanish 1 once and Spanish 2 twice.
So we also got some rad stuff to talk about, and we want to talk about the toy fair, which I just found out about today, Keith.
Yeah.
How have you been, buddy?
I've actually been pretty good. It's been bright and sunny here, so that's helping with my seasonal affective disorder. But it's been a busy week. Been doing some stuff. Got some stuff percolating and cooking. But
we love it.
Got some ideas I'm working on. So
nice.
Not too bad. And I went and bought some toys. So how
did
bad
you actually
can life
purchase
be?
some?
I did purchase some.
All right, maybe we should just jump right in then.
You wanted to jump right in? All right, great.
Let's talk about the toys first, since that seems to be on the top of the list of things you did.
All right. Well, today I just, because of the algorithm and because, China's watching everything we do,
Fair.
Facebook serves me ads for toy shows all the time. And so here in New Jersey, there was a tiny little toy show just a few minutes from my house. And so I was like, $5 admission,
okay,
like 10 minutes away. How could I not go to the Woodbridge Toy Show? Still going until 4 if you have a time machine. But it was really fun. It's like it's a small thing. It's at a Hampton Inn, and it had like one main room and then they had 2 breakout rooms and just a whole bunch of action figures and toys. And it wasn't like a giant selection of stuff. I think the Pops have taken over the world.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I haven't really gotten into Pops. So it's like there's just endless amounts of Pops. Interestingly, nary a single Star Trek toy in the whole place.
I feared you might say that.
Which I was kind of surprised by. They have none.
Yeah.
Right. Tons of Star Wars stuff. Endless wrestling stuff, lots of G.I. Joe. There's some vintage G.I. Joe stuff, which was fun because I remembered having some of that. But here's the thing: I had a good time. It was great. It's everything I wanted it to be. And I realized I didn't know it, but thankfully, you and I are both in correct uniform for a toy show. Because basically, you're a middle-aged white guy in a hoodie.
Yeah.
If you look through those, pretty much, I think I counted like 25 different middle-aged white guys just in the photos I took.
A couple puffy jackets.
Puffy jacket, but they've all got to have the hood. I had my hoodie on. It was really quite something. But it was like everything was reasonable. Everybody was friendly and nice. And so I'll show you what I got. First thing I got for my buddy who is a giant Jaws fan. I once texted him. We were talking. I was giving his daughter some of the Star Trek action figures, trying to indoctrinate them as early as possible.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I asked him, like, what's your holy grail of a figure? And he's like, Jaws figures. So I didn't get him the one he pointed, but I did. He doesn't watch this, so he doesn't even know he has a surprise coming. Here is a Jaws figure with Quint getting chomped down for his man cave. I think he's going to enjoy that.
Anything else fun? Or that's the
the
big
other thing I got, I bought my first wrestling figure for myself.
All right.
My first ever. And who do you think I got? I feel like you would have a decent chance of knowing exactly which figure I got.
Oh, I don't know. Most people like to go in for their first like a Piper type of scenario or a Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Ooh, classic. No, all right. So less 1989 and more 1997.
The Rock? Stone Cold?
No, close. Who do you think I would gravitate to, personality wise and style wise, as a wrestler?
This could be dangerous. Who would the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase springs to mind? Do you have a DiBiase type of vibe? If you're asking the truth.
I think you're giving me too much credit because
Leapin' Lenny Poffo.
No, of course it's Mick Foley.
Oh yeah, I should have known. Yeah,
and of course I got a classic Mankind figure because Mankind was the character that got me into it. So here
Very
he
cool.
is. This is the first iteration of Mankind when he still had the brown sort of torn shirt before he went with his white shirt for some of the more classic matches. This is pre Mr. Sacco, but really excited. It's fun. He was, it's the nice thing about going to a toy show is like this was just like in the $10 bin because the packaging was a little bit damaged, but I don't care because I'm about to bust it open and play with Mick Foley because.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here he is. Here it is. Mick Foley out of the package. So fun.
Oh, that's a good one. He's definitely more monstrous than real.
Oh
Mick
yeah,
Foley.
Look
at those are biceps.
Yeah, I'm sure Mick would have a pretty good joke about the physical characterization in this figure. But to be fair, my action figure is also just as unrealistic in how it's depicting my body. So I'll take it. So anyway, it was really fun. Went to I'll keep an eye out for other toy shows like that because it was easy, it was fun, and I bought some toys like one does.
That's rad.
Yeah, so there it is. Check out your local toy thingies. Be sure to bring your hoodie.
Yeah, we were on a road trip. I think I had mentioned as my rad thing a few weeks ago that I was going to stop at this cool toy store in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And we did stop. And, I was sending Keith some pictures. And truth be told, a lot of times these retail shops, like if you compare that market to the eBay market, they really upcharge a lot of stuff. But, that said, that's cool. This is a good example. Like, there's something to be said for as great as eBay is. If you really want to get something, you can find better deals on there, get a lot, and save some cash. Yeah. But truth be told, there's little to no fun in just kind of like looking at eBay pics and stuff. Like when you can go into a shop, whether you're buying anything or not, and hold it in your hand and see all of the different figures together, or see some vintage stuff, like what I thought was really cool.
And talk with another nerd.
Yeah. What I thought was really cool when I stopped at this shop last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was they had a whole wall, Keith, and we had mentioned it on the show, the starting lineup. Remember the figures from the 80s and 90s?
Oh, yeah.
They had...
Right behind me right there is a full collection of every Phil Simms starting lineup.
And they had the whole 1984 San Francisco 49ers team, like from Montana. Like, it was awesome. Yeah. And Jen was like, not enthused. She's so great. She really pretends for me.
She pretends better than like anybody I know.
Real. Yeah. So it was. It's awesome. That's cool. You got to swing in. Did you chit and chat at all, or no? It's just like
I chit and chat a little bit, not a lot. But he came with a whole mess of hands.
Keith, you're doing a lot of playing right now. Yeah, that's what they do now. They have the hands.
You've got like all sorts of different versions of the mandible claw before Mr. Sacco came out. So no, I chatted a little bit. I mean, like, it's just a whole bunch of dudes like me. It's like, so, no, I mean, I didn't like chitty chat. I was just like shopping, but it was fun. It was fun. So next time, I have to find a bigger one and go to one together. That'd be really fun.
I did hear that, you may be taking it under advisement to potentially we might watch night 2 of WrestleMania together. I've heard.
There have been some great articulation. There have been some discussions about something like that.
Now, Keith, you might not know this, but you attended my wedding. Did you know that at the time you were not a wrestling guy, but my wedding took place on WrestleMania?
I had no idea.
My brother was not pleased.
I bet. Oh, I think that explains the toast.
Yeah, he did make a wrestling toast. He's going to come up later in the pod as well. So I did mention I've been kind of down lately, and it's at least I'm at the age now where in those moments, I don't catastrophize anymore because I recognize that it's just kind of chemical it's happening, and I am able to sort of set things up. But one thing that kind of takes me elsewhere to get me out of my head is to watch not mindless television, but documentaries, like issue-based, not always issue-based, but I'm a big documentary head, and so there's a couple I've had on my list, and I wanted to bring up to our friends. And you watched a few, so why don't we just I got 3, you've got 2, why don't we go back and forth?
All right, you go first because you got 3.
Okay. I will start first with a Docuflix, which also known as a documentary on Netflix.
Oh.
That I just combined the words.
Mark?
Yes. Called, he doesn't know. He doesn't remember what he wanted to start with. No. MH370, the plane
I'm gonna watch that
disappeared. Now, this is a documentary on Netflix about Flight 370, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. It was released by a British documentary directed by Louise Malkison. And it basically chronicles the 2014 disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370.
Which has not been solved. Is that true?
It is true. It has not officially been solved. So the plane goes down on March 8th, 2014. The entire crew and all 239 passengers.
Was it that long ago?
Yes.
Wow.
It's been almost 8-9 years. The documentary itself is broken down into 3 episodes. Ostensibly, they're about an hour plus each, so it's
it's an investment.
Yeah, it's pretty. I think the total runtime is actually like closer to 90 minutes because they're not all the same. Regardless, I had high hopes for this because everybody loves a mystery. I remembered tangentially the sort of as it was happening. And I assumed when I started this, to be honest, that I couldn't remember what the eventual solution to the mystery was. And I figured, I'm going to get that.
Right.
Now, one of the problems with true crime documentaries, like your unsolved mysteries and things of that nature, are that they're unsolved. And that can leave a viewer a little unsatisfied if you're in for the mystery and then the solve, especially in this true crime age we're in where everything has a solution and we have podcasts that follow the investigation the whole way through. So I'll admit my bias up front in that I really expected there to be a solution at the end of this. Now, the giant mystery of this whole thing, Keith, is as you alluded to in the beginning, they don't know what really happened here. And I'd like to say to you that the documentary is trying to point out the sheer ridiculousness that in this day and age, a plane can just disappear.
Yeah, how is that even possible? Yeah.
So the documentary posits 3 potential alternate answers to the question that juxtapose with the Malaysian government, their findings, or their lack of concrete findings.
Interesting.
It's really interesting. I'm going to tell you my big problem with the documentary and why I was ultimately unsatisfied. Aside from there being no ending. It seems at some point to be trying to make a case that in the absence of official concrete evidence and transparency from the government and from the investigation, in the absence thereof, that vacuum is often filled with, at best times, radical departures from what the evidence supports, and in the worst of times, conspiracy theories and utter nonsense. People out for financial gain, Right. The problem with me giving it that benefit of the doubt is that this documentary is filled with the latter, right? It is filled with these people positing alternate exemplars, but these are people who have written books. These are people who have clearly been paid by this documentary to then say their crap online. And so you're spreading, like I said, at best, alternate theories, at worst, utter BS. And this involves close to 300 people who died and families who are looking for answers. So to just spout random theories does a
without evidence or
at times evidence that then the people are shown to be potentially compromised by Russians and you go down a rabbit hole. And so yes, at its face it is I'm fine with saying, but the family saying we've not been given adequate closure. Use this to remind people that this injustice, we
still don't know.
Yeah. I'd like to say that this is what this documentary does. I don't feel that it does it properly. I think that it gives too much weight to unsubstantiated claims and rumor and speculation, and less, let's look at the concrete evidence. The people who do have concrete evidence, like who are looking at data and flight data and trying to track down leads that way, are not, in my opinion, given equal weight in the conversation in this documentary. They skew towards the salacious, which makes sense. Netflix has sort of been going in that route lately. So if you're remotely interested in this topic, I guess it's worth, there's not a lot else out there documentary-wise on this, but it's not as, I think there's a couple of like National Geographic docs or whatnot that I haven't seen, but I will check out. So ultimately left a little dissatisfied.
That's a bummer, because I was excited to see that.
Yeah, so that's not particularly satisfied, so I thought I'd start there. Keith, where do you want to start?
All right. Well, keeping on a theme of documentaries that weren't quite as good as I'd hoped they would be, there's a documentary on Peacock about the cruise ship, the Princess Diamond, that got shut down. Diamond Princess, whatever, that got shut down right at the beginning of COVID, before anybody really knew what was going on. And it's a documentary about the experiences of the passengers on this cruise ship. And so, like, I don't want to say that it's not good. It is good. I'm not going to say it's not enlightening. It is enlightening. But I think it's harrowing, right? Because you have all these people on this cruise right as COVID is breaking out. This is in like December, January, February of 2020. And as a reference, like Broadway shut down on March 12th. And so it basically is taking footage shot by the passengers while they were going through that experience, and footage and interviews with them today about how the sort of lack of information that was happening, the speculations and conspiracy theories, but also just not really knowing, mixed with the cruise ship companies being wildly irresponsible, them continuing to
unprepared,
unprepared, but also irresponsible once they knew what was happening. So that the Diamond Princess was already dealing with cases and getting quarantined, and they were still loading people onto other cruise ships and saying everything's great. And then just sort of like the absolute mess of all of that. And then, which is really important. It's definitely worth a watch, but it sort of finishes a little quickly with what's kind of what the real travesty was. Because all of the, wealthy American passengers, eventually they got taken off and brought back in, and, they've done so in a wildly irresponsible fashion, which is responsible for most of the COVID in our country and like 70% of it in Australia, blah, blah, blah. So that was like terrible dereliction of duty and how they did that. But what got glossed over that we didn't really know were the employees on the cruise ship were stuck out there for like 6 months and desperately trying to get off, weren't allowed off. There were suicides all over the place, protests. And that was where like, oh my God, these people are, this is really where the true travesty is happening. And it's sort of tacked on for the last 10 minutes of the of the movie, and the movie was much more about like, you know, the rich white college kids getting tanked. Oh God, I might have COVID, and it sort of, and it certainly pointed out what some of the cruise lines were doing irresponsibly, but it didn't really hold their feet to the fire. And so it really felt like a documentary that took its foot off the gas about 3/4 of the way through. And
when was this released? Do you know?
Just recently, a couple of months ago.
Interesting, because some months ago I watched almost the exact same premise of a documentary, same ship. It was followed,
Right.
Called The Last Cruise, and I believe that was
HBO, I think.
HBO. Okay, yes, that sounds right. That one was very good, and it was much more focused on the experience of the staff, which is which I think you, like, as you pointed out, is much more interesting because, and I think an important tidbit to add to your analysis, Keith, is that the great majority of the staff on these ships it works in service, right? So your food service, your cabin service, and a lot of them are from Indonesia and in various other countries in which it's to get on one of these cruise ships is a great, I don't want to say honor, but it is your big escape from the poverty and from the life. And some people are on there for years just sending money back home. And so it's not, they didn't really have the ability to just stand up and say, well, I want out, right? They need this job, and they're put into incredibly, just like you said, mishandled, dangerous scenarios. And it is
being forced to not just be service people, but now medical people and then abandoned. Yes. Essentially, you know, once they got all the passengers off, they just threw them out in the ocean and abandoned them, and didn't pay them. So these people who are supporting their families back at home, not only can they not leave in these horrible conditions, they're not paying them. They can't even.
I had heard stories even after things sort of started back up a little prematurely, a lot prematurely. I witnessed on some of these ships because I got back on too. I witnessed late night boats leaving one ship, bringing infected or positive employees to the quarantine boat at nighttime, so that nobody saw the amount of people going, or floors being shut down, and but then people going up, or I shouldn't say people, I should say employees going up and down, wiping down the walls, trying to, or asking you to wash your hands. I mean, it's really harrowing. And
and I was hoping it was going to be that, and it ended up being like that, and then like, we don't really want to piss off anybody. So there it is.
That's a shame. Okay, so we're 0 for 2, it appears.
0 for 2.
Well, Keith, I'm happy to say I have a small obsession with cults. I just, because I think that a lot of us begin any conversation with the fact that wouldn't happen to me. I'm too smart for that. These people are stupid. These people are dumb. Yeah. And it is almost never that easy. And so I'm fascinated by what attracts people to cults, and then the power structure and the power dynamics and that take place within them. And there are great documentaries on Scientology. Oh, there's a good one coming up about the Waco Davidian thing, whether it be a religious cult, political cult, what have you. And so I had heard about one documentary on HBO, and I was a little incredulous at first because of the premise on the face of it, but I decided to give it a shot anyway. And it's called The Way Down, and it is the story of basically the cult of Gwen Shamblin. She's the minister of this cult, and ostensibly it begins, I should say, it is a documentary miniseries directed by Marina Zenovich, and it aired initially September 30th, all 3 episodes, 2001.
Oh, 2001?
Yes. However, 2 epilogue episodes were released in April of 2022. So
wow,
let me
21 years later.
What's that?
It's 21 years later.
No,
wow.
it's 1 year later.
You mean 2021? You said 2001.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, 2021. My bad. That is radically different. Yes.
I was going to say that footage does not look like it was done.
That 5 months is big. So ostensibly the way it starts is this, and why you think going in, oh, these people are nuts. It was a weight loss program. It was a religious weight loss program. Basically, pray the fat away. To really sum it up. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to mock and be like, well, these people are clearly ridiculous. But if you've ever struggled with your weight or struggled with anything, you try anything. And if you get in with a supportive group of people, be them religious or whatnot, you tend to say, well, I'm not like that, but they're supportive, I'll deal with it. I've sung at many churches. I'm not religious. And you're like, oh, you know what? I could get into this. These people are really great. That's the start of it for a lot of the people. And what I will say, it's really great about this documentary, though it does explore Gwen Shamblin and how she progressed from just running this sort of weight loss support group to turning it into a church, turning it into a cult, is very fascinating. And I don't want to give too much away. I think it's well done. It's well explored. It's very objective. And in its objectiveness, I think it is very demonstrative of the monstrosity that can take place, especially when these cult leaders really believe the BS they're serving. But it gives a lot of the voice to ex-members and explains their journey. And I think that is what we were lacking from that documentary you just mentioned, Keith, and what I think makes these stories powerful. And they recognize it. Look, they're saying, I'm not stupid. I hear what you're saying, but this is what it was like on the inside. But what's the most fascinating, usually you hear about your Scientologies or these cults that have developed over long periods of time. This was just since the 70s and 80s, she started her journey. So this is a relatively new thing. And so you see how a leader rises to power, but then how do you hold on to that power?
Yeah.
And so something happens that forces the two epilogue. Sometimes documentary making is just great timing, right? So during the filming of this documentary, one or more of the people in power at this church die. And what's the fallout of a cult? When the cult of personality either dies or, in some of our sakes, maybe gets handcuffed and carted to prison or indicted, what, in that vacuum, what happens? What does the future hold? Those questions weren't initially posed in this documentary, but were forced upon it during the filming, which creates a whole new interesting layer. I thought it was going to be, at best, sort of like a fun romp or like an interesting kind of popcorn documentary about a cult, or but HBO, don't play. This is hard hitting, it's harrowing, it's really interesting, high recommend, and it's complete now. So all 5 episodes, they're about 40 to 50 minutes each. Absolutely a binger over a night or two. High recommend.
Awesome. Well, that definitely seems like something I would check out, because I do find I do find cults interesting, and and like, what makes a cult? When does a religion turn over? When does it's really interesting, and it is fascinating, but it is part of the human experience, right? Like, we as human beings, because of just genetically how we evolved, we're very susceptible to stuff like that. We're smart enough to be stupid in a lot of ways, and it's fascinating. Which I guess tees up perfectly where I'm going to go. Speaking of cults, and also speaking of how we are all vulnerable to falling down a rabbit hole.
I have not seen this, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh, yeah. So this one I want to talk about. It's another HBO original. It's called Q Into the Storm. It's actually a year old. It came out in 2 years old. Came out in 2021. So after January 6th, this was sort of a follow-up there. It's directed and written by Colin Hoback, who also stars as sort of the main investigator, and it's basically a investigation into the Q cult, and trying to figure out not only just like the main driving figure is like, who is Q, right? Trying to uncover like who is Q, but also what is Q. In the sense of like, what is this movement? What's happening here? And the whole infrastructure which enabled that. And so it's a lot about the Chan sites, 4chan, 8chan, that sort of a deal, and dealing with who's on it, what's on it, why is it there, what is its function, but it really is a documentary about who runs them,
Mm-hmm.
and who and why and what's going on there, sort of leading up by accident into January 6th. So this documentary filmmaker was following this whole story for years over the course of this documentary, and I find it incredibly eye-opening at understanding what the hell is that? I mean, people who aren't in that world, it's really hard to explain. Like, Nancy Pelosi is stealing adrenochrome from abused babies and drinking it for eternal youth. Like, it's absolutely bananas. But the people who are in that world who believe that, it's really intense. And you have a system where this Q person, we never really, it's hard to tell what the motivations are, but the people who are believing these things, buying into this, they really believe it. And when they're trying to save the babies from the Hollywood pedophiles who are drinking their adrenaline, they really believe it. I mean, I don't think that is false at all. These people are genuinely terrified about what's happening.
Does it weigh into, though, whether the people at the top that are sourcing that information, that do they believe it, or is it just like throw a grenade in the works?
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, and figuring out who is it and why is it, and it's less about exploiting the crazy people who believe it, and more about figuring out who's exploiting those crazy people. And so it's a lot of tech stuff. It's utterly, it's fascinating. It's terrifying. It's really dark. Like, those Chan sites and what's, and the ties to white supremacists and Nazis, and like, just, and I don't mean like Nazi, we're using Nazi like euphemistically.
Yeah.
It's real Nazis, and the shootings, live streamed on this. And the other, dark worlds on there. It goes to very, very dark and disturbing places. But I think in order to understand this phenomenon, we need to know what this is. And I don't think it's exploitative to spend some time in this world to understand what's happening, understand why these people are out there, what they're trying to do. So actually, I watched this when it first came out, and I just rewatched it again this week, because after a couple of years of in hibernation, after being thoroughly disproven, all cues like, here's going to happen after January 6th. Like, oh, wait, no, Trump isn't going to be reinstalled, and all these predictions is all about these vague predictions. It all sort of got disproven, and people sort of moved on. But, guess what? It's coming back. The whole Q thing is coming back. And I don't know, I was reading somewhere that like a healthy percentage of Trump's truths now are referencing Q stuff. And so that's all coming back, and we're going to be dealing with this world once again. So that this documentary
and insert into this what you just said, the latter part of what you just said, is how, when you make all these vague predictions and whatnot, and then they are thoroughly disproven, you feel like that truth offers
that
some sort of
enough,
anecdote.
Right?
However, we talked about a couple weeks ago, all this AI stuff and deep fakes. What happens when we start inserting that into the mix?
We are not ready.
We
are not ready.
Some problems.
Like, I'm terrified of the deepfake AI implications on this coming election. It's terrifying. But I'll finish with this. We should all watch this just to understand what's happening, understand what happened, to understand what might happen again. However, this also has a fascinating personal element to this. We meet some of it's basically, there are three main characters, and they're the initial creator of 8chan, and then the father and son who own it today. And we meet a guy named Frederick Brennan, who's the one who created 8chan. who then sold it to these guys, worked for them, and then turned. And then as it started to spiral out, he was like, this is horrible. Like, the thing I've created has become a monster and we need to shut it down. It's bad. And then his battles to try to make that happen while these other two people don't. And then, you know, and they're all out in Southeast Asia. And then he has to like run from, he's about to be arrested and he has to run to the States, and our documentarian has become personally involved and he's trying to help him get out. And it's utterly suspenseful and fascinating on a human level as well. So definitely check it out. It's very eye-opening, but it's, you know, we're about to get right back into it. So, you know, I don't know what the current Chan is, because it was like 4chan and then 8chan, and I don't know what the Chan inflation game goes up to now. 37chan or whatever it is, but we kind of need to know what's going on in order to understand the context. So check it out. It's called Q Into the Storm on your HBO. Yeah, it's not a fun watch, but it's an important watch.
That one's on my list. Okay, so then I think it appropriate to end with another HBO joint. I think what we've established, Keith, is that HBO is knocking out the park.
Putting out good docs lately, yeah.
Well, you can't get any higher up the chain than the winner of the Academy Award this year for Best Documentary. I hadn't watched it, and I didn't know it was on HBO, but it is on HBO, and it's called Navalny. 2022 documentary, directed by Daniel Roher. Revolves around the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. Now, I want to put a kind of a caveat up front. Being anti-Putin does not necessarily make you a good dude. And I want to say that I don't know Navalny's like entire platform. I don't know his politics. I'm not championing this man as a Superman in any way. Like, I don't know his stance on Ukraine, any of that stuff, like his geopolitical. I don't know Russian politics, so I don't want to plant my flag anywhere. And the documentary doesn't particularly do that, but it does. He is a politician, so it does present him in a certain light clearly. However, it's not particularly the focus of this documentary. The focus of this documentary is, I don't know if you recalled in the news, Putin doesn't like this guy. And so he tried to kill him. There was that poisoning in the airport, if you recall.
Yeah.
And
well, among other things, this is the week he was indicted for war crimes.
Yes. And basically what this documentary tracks down, in juxtaposition of this guy realizing that he's also like a Jon Stewart type in that uses sort of political satire and things and he has lots of YouTube shows and stuff in order to get his word out. And so in the process of filming some stuff for his shows and his stuff, he is poisoned. And he records a lot of stuff saying, in the event of my poisoning, in the event of my death, XYZ. And so it's really powerful in retrospect, seeing what's happened. And he is poisoned, and there is an investigation to that poisoning. I won't give too much away. And so he is recovering. He does survive the poisoning. He's recovering in Germany and is in exile, basically, because the Russian government is either going to kill him or arrest him when he goes back to Moscow. But he's like, that's my home. I'm going back. In fact, he puts out a big video about, here's when I'm going back, here's the date I'm going back. And we follow him returning to Russia, where he is inevitably arrested. That's the spoiler alert, but it's the news. And his wife even gave a plea in accepting the Academy Award. Now, all that's awesome. It is absolutely filled with, if you had pitched this as a movie, you'd be like, I think it's a little over the top. But what I found most fascinating, I want to talk about on Geekly, you must watch this. You must watch it. It is incredible. It is harrowing. It is riveting. It is exciting. It is maddening. But here's kind of the crazy thing. When in an authoritarian government where everybody's a crook, basically, secrets, political secrets, murders for hire, industrialized hitmen, they don't particularly show any loyalty to anyone. So it turns out, Keith, they decide, well, we want to find out who tried to kill me, right? We know it was Putin, but like, who were his henchmen? What was the plan? In this government, with their 8chans and their dark web, you can like just pay some people and get some info. In fact, there's a scene, I don't want to give too much away, but there's this just like guy. He's like us. He's like an internet guy who pays for some information and is able to like very quickly figure out who these people at the top level of a political assassination, he's able to like figure out who they are. In fact, Keith, they called them on the telephone on the documentary. Wow. So I don't want to say what transpires, but it is incredible. It is absolutely, you're like, took my breath away. And then just kind of the way that an authoritarian regime can just say, they're lying. And it's like, in the face of all of this, just like, here it is, Putin can just shrug his shoulders and laugh. In fact, Putin's like smuggest thing is that he won't even say this man's name. In every interview and every question, every time you see, he refers to him as that guy, or he just it's reminiscent of some people we have in our politics. And you'll, excuse me, I think I might have. Is there something on my laundry? Is there?
Oh God!
You put a dust.
You've been poisoned by Putin.
It is another high recommend. In fact, just go on HBO Max and type in go to their documentary section and just start watching. It's that good. That's Navalny. It's on HBO Max. It is a must watch.
Yeah. I that sounds good.
Won the Academy Award.
Got to kick up some documentaries. Yeah, there's some in. Well, there was another documentary. The one that I will never ever watch because I will be too sad to even move. About them rescuing cranes in New Delhi
yes.
From the pollution, but Mick Foley was talking about as they're like helping a crane in an Indian in their dialect, they were talking about Hell in the Cell, and they were talking, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm in an Oscar nominated movie." So
I did watch another doc that I was going to mention. It's called Gunther, the world's most richest dog. On Netflix, and it is like a 5-part. It is a catastrophe that was even greenlit. So for every great documentary, there is trash out there for you as well. So Keith and I clearly love documentaries. Anything that you guys have been watching documentary-wise? Yeah. I've seen Fire of Love, seen a lot of the documentary. We talked about Elephant Whisperers last week. Let us know in the comments. We'd love to know what you've been watching. But we've been running a little long. We talked about 5 docs. Let's talk about some rad stuff. Keith, I'll let you start since it appears you have 2.
I have 2?
It said 3 rad things.
Did I say 3 rad things? Oh.
It was very specific.
Oh, I did say 3 rad things.
So 2 rad things.
No, I didn't even have anything. It was inflation, okay?
Yeah, it's fair. Actually, I have a really interesting one, and I apologize in advance. I have to be a little vague. But I think I can say that this involves my brother, who is a principal at a middle school, who, Keith, found himself put on blast on a right-wing podcast this week, which is pretty heavily followed. I'm not going to mention the podcast because I don't want to give any fodder to this person. But basically, the way they summed it up on the podcast is my brother's part of the woke left, who is racist against white people. I'll put it there. Now, I should mention, we're white. First things first.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what happened and why it's my weekly rad, actually. Because
because I was about to say, like, hey, you know what's code words for I'm racist? If you use the phrase racist towards white people.
Yeah. So here's...
It's hard to get out that phrase from under your hood.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'm going to tell you why it happened, and then you'll see where I'm going with this, I think, at least for our podcast. My opinion. These are all my opinion. My brother has not asked me to put this on the internet. In fact, I have to stay vague. He would not like it. So here's the basics of it. Each section of my brother's school has a name or a designation. Now, their school colors are blue and white, okay? So there is a bathroom that is designated in the white area, and there's a thing called e-hall pass.
I know exactly. Okay.
And it's basically, they don't do hall passes anymore. You have like an app or something that like you get the teacher like goobers out, and you can, I don't know how it all works. But I do know that on the app, you can go to the white bathroom, right? So recently, there was a civil rights speaker who came to the school. I'm going to stay everybody's name out of it because I don't know what is. And was a student at a segregated school who was then one of the first black students to attend a integrated school, and they gave a big speech at my brother's school. And
then noticed there's a whites only bathroom in the school.
Nope, not at all. So they gave the speech, and not long after said speech, a group of students, middle school students, Keith, Caucasian middle school students. My brother's school is like 97% Caucasian. There are like a handful of non-white students. A group of students decided that on e-hall pass, it shows up as white bathroom. And hearing these stories of the civil rights leader, realized this could potentially be unsettling, uncomfortable,
sure.
indirectly triggering for some of our colleagues, our students. And so a group of middle school students went to their principal, my brother, and said, "Hey, can we change the name of this on the thing so it doesn't show up as white bathroom?" And my brother said, "Well, that is incredibly empathetic. That is incredibly everything you want to be teaching students in a school."
Right, like thumbs up to everything fostering that environment.
That's like checklist of everything that is working.
Many things are going right in that equation.
And so my brother said, "Why, absolutely, I'll change the name because that's you're teaching us a lesson. Yeah, this is great." Yeah. Well, it took not but mere days for this to go down the chain, Keith, and become my brother. It is a woke. He's over woke and blah 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 blah. So whatever. That's what zealots on either the fringe do, but clearly enough, parents in the district listen to this crap and are showing up at the school, leaving voicemails, like literally making my brother's life a living hell.
Jesus Christ.
Came to the school board meeting to raise hell during public. Look, I'm happy to say that the superintendent of this district did stand up and at least vocally support, which they're not really supposed to do, but vocally support my brother's stance. But the funny story I do have is that one parent came to the school and was like, "Well, if they requested a name change, I'm requesting it changed back." And my brother's like, "Well, a big distinguishing factor between you and the middle school students who brought this to my attention is that they're middle school students and you're a grown man who does not come to school here." And even the parent was like, "Okay, you got me there."
So these performative outrage things, it's so childish because, all right, so even if you agree or you agree that this is necessary or you don't think that's necessary, you're creating so much outrage over a thing that doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't help. It means nothing. Mm-hmm. Nobody's job is being taken by this. Nobody's excluded. No, it's a name of a freaking bathroom. Are you so fragile? Are you so small and scared and fragile that affects your day?
Right, exactly.
Like you talk about being snowflakes, right? Are you so scared and vulnerable and fragile with your tiny little ego that is worth your time? Yeah. That is worth your effort. It's pathetic.
I mean, especially in the fact that you can argue. I'm not saying I agree, but you can argue we should be able to protest which books are in the library, or we should have a say. Like my opinions on how parents involved they should be in the determination of curriculum is a different argument. But this isn't even that. This is as you said, students who with open hearts for their co-students.
Well, and the outrage, it's kabuki, it's fake, it's false, it's it is just, it's a dance. It's a performance. It has nothing to do with anything. It affects nothing. It's just kabuki.
Well, but it does affect something. It does affect something because I truly believe that, and this is me and my opinions on my podcast, goddammit, is that at our core, these kids are showing us week to week when we talk Weekly Rad that they have that empathy, right? Yeah. It's the hate and the bigotry that is taught. And this kabuki theater can potentially teach those kids. And I hope that enough of kids keep doing the right thing and that these lessons and these speakers are clearly having impact. So I'm hoping that my brother, and I talked to him about this because it is discouraging, Keith, as you can imagine. I hope that they realize that in that discouragement, the opposite effect is in effect as well. Those kids learned. And that is the Weekly Rad for me, is that those kids... Yeah. It might be a small. They're middle school kids though. It might be a small little swing in the grand scheme of hatred in this world, but they recognize that it might be triggering for some of their colleagues, and they said we want to do something about it. And
I think this is like where I think you can see clearly where the lines are drawn, right? The kids are coming at it from a place of empathy. The people arguing against it are coming from a place of lack of empathy, right? There's the color white is not something that deserves your empathy. It does not need it is a color. It doesn't need your empathy. It doesn't need your back. So all you are doing is arguing against those kids thinking of somebody else's experience. You're not defending the color white.
Yeah, right? It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
Because, it just, like fuchsia, it's just a color. The only thing you are arguing is against people having empathy for people who are not like themselves.
I'll leave it with this because I'll leave it with this. The best part of it for me
before I get too fired up.
I did listen to said podcast, and the best part of it for me is they continually refer to my brother as Superintendent Indeglio. My brother is the principal of a school. He's not a superintendent. So even
he got promoted.
Even the most basic level of fact checking didn't take place. They didn't even get his title right. I mean, they don't even know. Like, they clearly didn't even Google the story because they couldn't even get that right. But my brother did say, he's like, I did get a promotion, so that's good.
You should write and say, I'm the president. Damn it.
Of these United States. So that's anyway,
right. He's going to George Santos his way to the presidency. All right, yeah. So I will leave with a rad thing that is much less important or exciting. But our Pretzel, the little dog, Jillian was out talking with the neighbors, and they just got a new puppy, like this big giant rambunctious puppy, and so they met for the first time. And the little blind Chihuahua, whose legs don't work, started off looking in the wrong, barking in the wrong direction, but scared the crap out of that much larger dog, who's never been afraid of anything, but ran away. So Pretzel is a gangster here. Oh man,
she's
in New
OG.
Jersey.
She is OG.
She sure is, and that made me chuckle.
Well, on that note, that brings us to the end of this week's K&M Geekly. We're going to see you next week, friends, but in the interim, don't let anyone yuck your yum. Keep on doing those things you find fun. Welcome back to baseball, and in the interim, keep on geeking on.